As the Philippines' war on drugs continues, so do thousands of alleged killings. Human Rights Watch is asking the United Nations to take action, claiming new leadership has not stopped former President Duterte's brutal tactics. But how much would the Human Rights Council be able to do? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the Philippines' war on drugs. Before handing over power this year, former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte oversaw the killing of 8,000 suspected drug dealers and addicts. That's according to UN figures. Advocacy groups contend the number could be 3 times higher. Often, the murders were carried out by masked men, and the victims were often small-time drug pushers in poor neighborhoods. Judges for the International Criminal Court ordered a formal investigation last year. And for many, especially the families of the victims, an ICC investigation was more than welcome news. Just listen to this mother whose son was killed and was pushing the government to cooperate with the International Court.
We are very happy because God never sleeps and because the ICC didn't fail to look after us. We're thankful for them opening investigations against the President of the Philippines. Although he is not my president, he's the reason why my son was killed.
But that mother's hopes were dashed, first when the Philippines government postponed the ICC's investigation. Then just last week, current President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. formally rejected prosecutors' requests to reopen their case. Marcos said that the International Criminal Court is very simply supposed to take action when a country no longer has a functioning judiciary, no longer has some of the organs of the state and police. And that condition does not exist in the Philippines. Now, Marcos has said he does not support all aspects of his predecessor's drug policies, and he's promised to take a rehabilitation approach rather than a punitive one. But his remarks have been met with skepticism. Human Rights Watch has called for an independent UN inquiry, stating the Marcos government can't be trusted, and that using a drug rehabilitation approach means little when police and mystery gunmen are still executing suspected drug users and dealers. Law enforcers should receive clear orders to stop the drug war enforcement once and for all. And while this is a story about law and order, human rights, and politics, for many of the victims' families, it's also about being heard.
There are so many more victims, especially in the provinces. Their families need to come out and speak up as well in order to bring justice to their loved ones.
But can that justice be forthcoming without international pressure? Here now to debate that and more are from Washington, Dino De Leon. He is the lawyer of Leila de Lima, the country's former justice secretary who investigated allegations of extrajudicial killings and is now in detention facing charges linked to drug trafficking. From Manila, we have Kristina Conti. She is a member of the National Union of People's Lawyers. It's a human rights group. And in Boston, we have Phil Robertson. He's the deputy director of Human Rights Watch's Asia division. And we need to stress that we repeatedly requested representatives from the Marcos and Duterte governments to join us on this program, but unfortunately, no one could accept our invitation. So we'll continue from here. Phil Robertson, let me begin with you. Human Rights Watch is now asking the UN to take action. So first tell us, how bad you actually think it's gotten in the Philippines, and has anything actually improved since Duterte left office?
Well, what we're seeing is a lot of talk, a lot of rhetoric, but not a lot of change on the ground. And this is what the Philippines government excels at, throwing paper commitments at international agencies and the Human Rights Council, and implying that this flurry of word means something like a political commitment to actually do something. And in fact, what we're seeing is that President Ferdinand Marcos has refused to repudiate the drug war and that the killings are continuing. And there has been a recent study by the Third World Study Center at the University of Philippines, which has found that 221 people have been killed in drug-related killings this year. And almost a third of that, 72, were committed in the first 2 months after the inauguration of President Ferdinand Marcos. So, without a clear order from Ferdinand Marcos, his top police officials are continuing the drug war and they're continuing the killings.
Okay,
The
but I mean,
culture of impunity has not changed.
Yeah, if Marcos, though, doesn't allow the ICC to investigate, why would the UN Human Rights Council actually be able to make a difference in the cases as you're asking for them to specifically investigate?
Well, the ICC certainly is looking at this case, and Ferdinand Marcos has filed appeals say that they shouldn't be allowed to investigate. The decision will come not from Ferdinand Marcos; it will come from the ICC itself, where they allow the prosecutor to continue his investigation. And that investigation, we believe, will continue because the Philippines had a chance to prove that their national mechanisms functioned. They claimed that they were looking at 52 different cases. But after a certain period of time, when the ICC had examined what the Philippines were doing, they realized that the investigations weren't serious. And that's the core problem. There's a lot of rhetoric about we're going to investigate, we're going to look at this. But at the end of the day, not much happens. And it's still the same system. It's still the same impunity. It's still the same problem.
Quickly, Phil, what do you think the chances are, A, of the UN actually taking the action you're requiring here, and B, of the Philippines enforcing it if asked?
Well, what we want is for the Human Rights Council to pass a strong resolution to continue its monitoring and its reporting about what is happening here. The game that is being played in Geneva is that the Philippines is trying to slip the noose. They're trying to get out of any sort of further reporting. They've got this UN joint program with the UN, which is all about capacity building, but there's nothing about accountability that's really going forward. And that is the fundamental problem. So we want to make sure that the international community remains focused on this and, don't let other problems in other countries distract them.
Okay. Kristina, I'd like to turn to you because you're in Manila. And I know this is a hard reality for attorneys like yourself, to swallow, but if you can, help us understand what it is that makes these policies actually popular with voters, in spite of what Human Rights Watch and Filipinos like yourself actually say.
These policies kind of work or appeal to people because it promises to target criminality. Duterte from the very beginning has linked drugs to criminality, that the criminals that are all around us are drug addicts. The thing is, as it turned out in this drug war, the criminals now are the persons in uniform. And with that entirely, there's nobody else to trust here in the Philippines. So right now, there's there's an irony in what the people support. People do support Duterte. People do support Marcos, but they are against extrajudicial killings in the Philippines. And this is the tiny sliver of hope that we see, that people will understand that in the Philippines, rejecting the extrajudicial killing should also mean rejecting Duterte and Bongbong Marcos himself.
You hope they'll understand that, because you simply can't have thousands of people killed and no one responsible for it. So why isn't there more real outrage among Filipino voters that people are being killed with impunity? Is it because they generally think that, first of all, maybe these people just somehow deserve to die, and, should some innocents be killed in the process as well, that's just a small price you have to pay to build a safer country?
We're going into the elections already, and there's a lot of discussion about it here in the Philippines, especially with the massive amount of disinformation that has spread, especially, as pointed out, from the Marcos administration, or the Marcos camp then, and now the Marcos administration. Until now, the disinformation as to, first, Marcos connected to his father's legacy during martial law, which was actually built on discipline, which kind of echoes what Duterte has already laid out, that people should be disciplined and should follow the law and just, shut up. Also, on the other hand, you have a disinformation about the opponent, the opposition right now. we're in a position of defensive, that we have to shield ourselves from allegations of red tagging, that we are the ones who are criminals, the opposition and those who are voicing out dissent against these policies. And likewise, that the opposition are rabble rousers. And it really has to stop. On the point, another point about the elections, that there, of course, are still concerns about electoral fraud in the Philippines. So not a lot really believe that Marcos ran away with like more than a majority of the vote, considering his background, considering his family baggage. So to speak.
Okay. Dino, I mean, okay. I mean, we are where we are now. So the ICC investigation has been stopped. Human Rights Watch is making this appeal to the UN Human Rights Council. But in the meantime, Filipino authorities say we have the institutions to carry out the investigations necessary. Do they? Will or can the Philippines carry out a transparent investigation?
Well, Andrea, to begin with, the institutions have not worked in the past to actually prosecute those who are involved. Just to refresh the numbers, even the Philippine National Police mentioned that around 29,000 people actually died under the bloody drug war. They call this the deaths under investigation. So even the PNP's own data says that's around 29,000. And if we're going to take a look at it, there are no clear cases that have been filed against the supposedly responsible individuals. The only case that we know that reached conviction is the case of Kian de los Santos. That's just one individual who was convicted under the violent drug war. So if the institutions are indeed working, then why is it that individuals are not actually being prosecuted for this degree of deaths that actually transpired and that are continuously happening in the Philippines? So the institutions right now, unfortunately, are not sufficient, especially considering that the Marcos administration seems to not actually want to investigate these officials, including the former president. There's no indication that the Marcos administration will actually investigate President Duterte, Senator Bato de la Rosa, who was the former PNP chief, and even the police officers, the high-ranking police officers who executed the violent war on drugs.
Right. I want to talk a little bit more about that. And if you can tell us, from the evidence you've seen, who is actually committing these murders on the ground? Who's ordering these murders? Are they connected to the top echelons of government? Or are these more local vigilantes at times empowered by the impunity and even lower level police?
It is very clear that, in fact, the violence is connected with the official operations of the Philippine National Police, and that this is the reason behind this is because the Philippine National Police actually released a circular stating that the main object of their operations is and I quote, neutralization. And when you use neutralization, the word neutralization, that's actually a go signal towards the police officers on the ground to actually kill. And that's the reason why this is the kind of operation that we're seeing from the Philippine National Police. Take note, Andrea, that in fact this circular coming from the Philippine National Police, which was issued as early as 2016, has not yet been lifted by the Marcos administration, meaning the Marcos administration is bent to continue the violence that was perpetrated by the Duterte administration.
So, I mean, in the Philippines, I mean, maybe it's better if I turn to Manila to ask this. Does it feel, in a sense, like a free-for-all?
Right now, yes, still. As Dino has said, there has been no repudiation or repeal of this memorandum circular. And as of now, we do feel that the Philippine government has been dragging its feet with regard to this policy. And it's just letting the policy run its course. And the problem is you have the people in place. And when I say people, one of the, theories, which would be supported by facts on our end, is that there are death squads. These policemen have gathered or come together as death squads with specific quotas and reward system in place so that every killing will be equivalent to additional money or a day off and so forth. So it is embedded in the system. I'd also like to turn our attention to this other figure of persons killed during legitimate, quote unquote, police operation. So clearly, the killers in these incidents are policemen, and they have killed someone during the course of police investigation. As of May 31, 2022, and that was before the election, 6,252 were registered under the or by the government official countdown. It's the real numbers PA. According to them as well, 345,000 people have been arrested. And these people are languishing in jail because of policy, not because of individual police practice or individual lapses in judgment of the policemen. This is clearly because of policy.
Okay. Phil,
If I may, Andrea.
go ahead, Dino. Yeah.
Yeah, just to echo what Kristina was saying, and in fact, the question that you asked a while ago is how is the situation in the Philippines right now? As we very well know, there are around 67 lawyers who have been killed under the Duterte administration. That's a lot in the last, compared to the figures the last 30 years. So the environment is not safe even for legal practitioners who would want to defend the most fundamental human rights in the Philippines. And there is no action whatsoever coming from the Marcos administration to investigate the lawyers who are being killed. So even us legal practitioners, as I'm sure Kristina would affirm, are actually not safe. And if we're going to take a look at the attitude of this administration, if they are in fact indeed serious, the first thing that they have to do is to start a conversation on how they would want to plan to address these situations. But as you can see, even in this discussion, they're not present. That actually shows the attitude of this administration in terms of dismissing what's happening on the ground, or actually just maintaining silence insofar as these official policies are concerned.
Phil, let me ask you.
A lady lawyer was just killed the other day.
Go ahead, Kristina, sorry.
Yeah, no, a lady lawyer was just killed a few days ago.
And that's what I want to ask, Phil Robertson about. When you publish your numbers, Human Rights tries to do its own investigations, Human Rights Watch, and the government comes back and says, your numbers are, crime numbers that are contained among criminals. We're making the country safer. Shoot all the numbers at us you want. Overall, the general public feels better about living in a safer country. What can Human Rights Watch say to that?
Well, it's very simple. We say that there's a right way and a wrong way to investigate crime, and you're pursuing the wrong way. You can't just execute people. There has to be due process, and there has to be a rule of law. And, the Philippines government is trying to claim that it is carrying out rule of law, that it is focused on criminality. But in fact, what they've done is they've let loose these death squads who have been killing people left and right. And nothing has changed. I mean, we still have the limited human rights investigations. There's still no real investigation capacity by the police. There's very little interagency cooperation, limited forensic capacity. These judicial processes go on forever, even in cases where there are real actions. The reality is that nothing has changed. The only thing that's changed is that the Philippines is getting better at writing reports and sending them to the Human Rights Council.
Right.
That's why we're saying that that there has to be continued engagement. And let's be very honest. I mean, in Geneva, a lot of governments are saying, well, geez, Duterte is gone. He was the worst. Ferdinand Marcos, says the right things. He's not so bad. Maybe we can just let it go and not pay that much attention. And what we're trying to say is that the situation on the ground in the Philippines has not significantly changed. The deaths are continuing, and there needs to be accountability. We can't just sort of leave it to the Philippines government. And that is what the Philippine government is trying to persuade everybody. Leave it in our hands. We've got a national institution. We've got national mechanism. Everything will be fine. And, Ferdinand Marcos is trying to persuade diplomats in Geneva that this is okay, and it is not. There needs to be more action.
There are two more things I want to get to. Kristina, go ahead.
Sorry. I'd just like to update a bit on that fact about safety in the Philippines. Recently, there has been a spate of disappearances. In fact, young women have been abducted here in the Philippines, and it's worrisome that the connection is that while it's not necessarily state forces who are doing the abductions, the perpetrators are being assisted by and shielded and taken away to safety or in cooperation with state law enforcers. It's because they can get away with murder.
Right.
They
So
already
it
have
sends a
done
dangerous
murder.
message to others. Go ahead,
Impunity.
Dino.
Yeah, I just want to say, though, that it is not true that Filipinos actually feel safer under the violent war on drugs. Actually, if you're going to take a look at it, what's the previous administration is very good at executing propaganda and spreading disinformation. In fact, before Duterte, if you're going to take a look at it, one of the reasons why Duterte won as president was because of the misconception that Davao was safe. And the only basis of that during that time was a poll online. It's called mimbeo.com. But if you're going to take a look at the facts on the ground, Davao was actually also not free of criminality. In fact, it was #1 in murder, #2 in rape, #3 in robbery, and #4 in theft nationwide. So in fact, this illusion that they create that the Philippines is safer is actually not true if you're going to take a look at the facts on the ground.
I asked before about the level of sympathy or potential empathy for the victims, these 8,000 people that just under Duterte's time are gone. But I'm also going to ask you, Dino, because you specifically represent one now former politician who is currently jailed for allegations of her involvement in drug trafficking. What is the public sentiment on that? Are they disturbed when they see people like your client detained, or do they feel, I don't know, all these politicians are corrupt anyway, so it doesn't really matter to us if you throw them into a cell and throw away the key for a bit?
It's very unfortunate that the key feature of the previous administration's attitude was to silence dissent. And this was exemplified by the case of Senator Leila de Lima. Let's remember that Senator Leila de Lima's case was investigated by the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. And they categorically found out that, or they released categorical opinions stating that the detention of Senator Leila de Lima was arbitrary. What is the sentiment of the people on the ground? Let's remember as well that Senator Leila de Lima, there was a well-organized destabilization campaign against Senator Leila de Lima, and her only fault was that she called for the investigation of the violent war on drugs, and she was the first Philippine leader who actually said that the violent war on drugs was inhumane and that it shouldn't be the track that we should be pursuing. So the very first thing that the Marcos administration should do, if it really wants to show that indeed it has supports human rights, is to actually free Senator Leila de Lima. Unfortunately, we're not seeing anything related to that. In fact, the attitude towards Senator Leila de Lima has not changed. And unfortunately, this administration is still using the same drug lords, convicted drug lords and convicted criminals to testify against Senator Leila de Lima. There was just another testimony by a convicted criminal yesterday. And this administration is pursuing the persecution of Leila de Lima.
So much corruption seems at every level. But a final question then for Kristina. I mean, when we talk about, what Filipinos actually want, because even if you think there are some problems at the ballot box, they are still electing these people. They're still putting them into power. And when we talk about the sympathy, we have to remember this isn't just about people accused of selling drugs and trafficking. These are also people who are addicted to drugs. Do Filipinos differentiate them from the dealers, or does it feel like it's all more or less the same? The people caught in this net aren't going to find a lot of sympathy from a number of Filipino voters.
To be candid, Andrea, there is a stigma if you are related in any way to the drug trade. And unless you do know these persons personally and you can vouch for their family backgrounds, etc., they would tend to see you as an outsider. So the othering, the treatment of other aside from you and taking them out of the sphere of humanity, in fact, by dehumanizing them and saying that they don't deserve our sympathy, they don't deserve our respect, they don't deserve justice, it's really taken a toll. And there is a problem, especially when the dead during this war on drugs campaign have turned out not exactly to be these drug addicts, not exactly related to the drug trade. There's a lot of, I hate to say this, but the term is collateral damage. There's a lot of collateral damage. People who are in no way related, who were just there at the wrong time, at the wrong place, who turned up dead because of all these killings, and possibly targeted by a vigilante. So it's really been hard until now.
Okay, that will have to be the final word. I'd like to thank Dino De Leon and Kristina Conti also so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers. Our viewers, of course, for spending this time with us as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at @the_newsmakers, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.